Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. As human beings have migrated over millennia, they have left behind parts of themselves as they moved toward new lives in new lands. Recently, however, technology has changed some of that. Our next guest will talk about her new documentary on this very subject. Vandana Magal is a professor of journalism and herself a transnational between her native India and her adopted United States. Vandana, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
You bet. So you were living in India, you had gone through school, you were a young adult working successfully as a journalist, but you decided to change things up and move to the United States. Tell us about that.
So yes, I worked as a journalist at this newspaper called the Times of India. It is one of the largest dailies in South Asia. I actually worked for the Economic Times, and that time there was this quest to broaden my horizons, to learn more, and I came here to do a doctoral program. Actually, I started with a master's program, and then wanted to study more, and that's my trajectory to come to the United States.
So you ended up doing your PhD in journalism.
In communications policy, actually related field, but not precisely journalism. But I did write as a freelance writer for a while. My first articles in the United States were in the Toledo Blade, which is a regional newspaper in the Ohio area.
Sure, sure. And coming up this Monday evening, is the premiere screening of a new documentary. Tell us about that.
Yes, so the documentary speaks about transnational communities in the city and how they use media to stay connected to their heritage countries. So I'm very interested in immigrant communities and their trajectory and how they maintain their identity, their transnational identity, being a, say, Vietnamese American or Bosnian American or Indian or Indo-American, so to speak, or Chinese American. So I have observed that people now have kind of a hyphenated identity, especially the new immigrants. So I'm interested in the immigrant experience and how media plays a role in that, in their everyday life as an immigrant.
So I want to get to the hyphen question in a moment, but you use the word transnational. How is that different from international, multinational? Because it's a relatively new word for the general public.
Right. So transnational is kind of the word that's used. It's a sociological term, so to speak, right? That sort of actually illuminates on this idea that we have transcended, societies have transcended from being contained in a nation to being transnational. Because if you think about this, every social problems or politics or finances or even individual lives, they have a transnational quality now. So transnational simply means that you don't belong into just one nation, but your life really spreads across nation, political, economic, cultural life of individuals and of, say, corporations or other kind of entities. I think there is some transnational aspect to every aspect of social life today. So I think that word is more useful in some ways.
So this notion of transnational implies some kind of back and forth connection or movement, which I think for centuries wasn't, and even a century ago when we look at, those people who were born in the United States, if they look at their grandparents who moved here, there was a lot less mobility, certainly communication was much more limited. So if you did move, there you were sort of stuck in the new place without access to the homeland.
Right, and here's the interesting communication angle to this, because yes, you're right. Previously, when people moved from one place to another, they moved, and they had to leave something behind. Today, they can be connected through media technologies, through communication technologies. So for instance, when I came to the US, this is again 25 years ago, I could hardly, the only connection I had with my family, my friends, was through letters. I mean, those days we wrote letters, right? I still have my mother's aerogram, so to speak, where she wrote long letters about what was going on in the family and so on. So every week I would get a letter from my mother or my father, and that was the mode of communication. Because telephone calls were very expensive. I remember paying $3 a minute or something like that to AT&T, which was a long distance carrier then. And it was very expensive to be on the telephone with your family. That's not the case today. I mean, today's immigrants now, they can talk to their family all day if they like, and free on Skype and such technologies, or WhatsApp, and there's so many ways for them to stay connected with their families and friends. And also about news. I mean, I worked for the Times of India, and so I wanted to read the paper once in a while, and we would get one copy of the paper from in the library, in the university library, and all of the Indian students sort of lined up to get to that paper.
Wait your turn.
Yes, exactly, and that too a week-old copy of the paper, but we were just happy to hold that paper and read about India. I mean, can you imagine the transformation from that time
But
today?
that was your connection to the homeland, the heartland.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's this what we call diasporic consciousness, right? In the sense that when you move away from where you grew up, you want to keep, you have memories of that place. You want to know what's going on. And so there was this need to stay tuned in to what was happening in the country, in your heritage country. And I'm sure that's true with all of the other communities from who are from different parts of the world. So that was my experience, but that has changed today for the new for immigrants since the advent of the internet, so to speak, the satellite and computer technologies. They allow so much more interaction with your home country.
And air travel has become more convenient, I think, for
yes.
people who want to physically go back home.
Yes, a little bit more tedious. The comfort of the old air travel is gone away, of course, but it's so much more frequent, and it's much more cheaper in some ways, and people travel so much more. And that's what we mean by sort of this hyperactivity across borders. Global, if I have to use that term, globalization or movement of people from across borders has been there for a long time. But today it's just so intense. Sometimes in sociological terms we say intensive globalization, which is a very active in all walks of life. There is this interaction with other countries.
Which really means that people don't have to give up as much as they had to in the past.
Right. There is no need to even if you have built a life in the new place, in the place of arrival, so to speak, what you left behind doesn't have to be sort of gone, relegated to memory. You can still actively access what you left behind in many ways. You can't be physically there, and yet you can experience almost anything that's going on through media or communication technologies.
So the cutting off is less abrupt.
That's right. I mean, I have heard of, or I've seen people do this. So a wedding, for instance, in a family, somebody is holding a computer, a camera, and then people here can actually witness live the happenings at the wedding. If you can't be there. So these technologies have really changed how we interact with places where we are not present.
Very emotionally, very powerful.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell me about hyphenation and what you learned on this project.
So I think one of the things that sort of really occurred to me that, I don't know if I wouldn't be so media-centric and say it's because of the media or communication technologies, but I think this connection with the old country, so to speak, with what you left behind, that maintenance of that connection has allowed people to keep that old identity, so that you don't have to sort of melt into the new place, build a life, yes, but still stay connected. And in that sense, your old identity can stay with you. So I have seen that people today in the US, most of the sort of immigrant communities, so to speak, people who come from Vietnam or Bosnia or Sudan or China or India, they call themselves that way. They call themselves Vietnamese American or Chinese American or Sudanese American or Bosnian American. And so there is this hyphenated identity that is, I want to believe that it's enabled by this connection due to communication technologies.
And allows you to retain part of your history, part of your heritage, without having to, submerge yourself 100% in the new culture.
Correct. And so it's this kind of a hybrid identity, or you don't have to be, to use that sort of cliched melting pot idea, right? You previously, when the Italians or the Sicilians came, they gave up their old identity in some ways, although not fully, but they wanted to be Americanized. That's what I have heard from many of my friends, the previous generations, like 2 generations ago maybe. But today that's not the case. People want to retain that identity. So the melting pot really has changed into the idea of salad bowl, right, where you keep your flavor intact and still be part of this American life.
Sure. It's not all or nothing.
That's right, and contribute as much to American life. Be an American and yet have your old identity intact.
Sure.
I think, to sort of state it kind of simply, that's what I have seen.
Let me ask you, did you see something in the subjects of your documentary that parallel your own personal life, your own family life?
Alan, I have seen that, it all depends upon your trajectory of your immigrant experience, in the sense that where you came from, when you came, and what were the circumstances then. I think that changes how you experience being coming from another place and settling in another place. So there are parallels, and yet there are many differences too. Because as I said, what is available, the kinds of connections that are available today for immigrants were not necessarily there for me. And there's no regret about it. That's how it was. So people today are really totally connected. Whereas when I came here, as I said, there was some isolation, there was some sort of longing, but that also perhaps provided this time for, how solitude is good for you sometimes. So time for reflection, time to think about what is it that you're going to do in this new place, time to sort of enjoy or be part of something completely new. There was no time, there was no way to be connected with the old country, like really truly. So you had to find new ways to think about life in different ways. And I think in my case, I thought that was, when I look back, I think that was interesting and different from many of the interviews that I have seen today, is this, I had this opportunity to be part of something new. and learn something completely new, or culturally, be part of something that I was not used to, that was not familiar. And so that teaches you something too.
We have to wrap up in just a moment, but to conclude, can you tell me what would you like the audience members at Monday night screening and down the road when lots more people view the documentary, what would you like them to take away?
Well, I made this documentary so that, as sort of scholars, media scholars, or sociologists or anthropologists, we talk about the immigrant experience and what it could be. With research, of course, but here's a chance, I thought, with the documentary to really give voice to people and people from the communities and let them tell their stories. And their stories are very important and very significant for us to think about, yes, what is that immigrant experience and what is the role of media technologies? So I was it was almost like a grounded theory approach where I heard what people were saying, and I wanted their voices to come through. And that's why this sort of documentary I think is significant in that sense. And I want people to see that and learn from other people's experiences.
Well, certainly here at Feel Like You Belong, we're firm believers in storytelling. So
yes.
I want to thank you for coming by the studio today and sharing your insights from the documentary. So much success with that.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
You bet. And for our viewers at home, stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment with some tips on American English, culture, and humor. Across many cultures, people have used animals to tell stories that illustrate foolish human behavior. Using stereotypes of various animal characteristics is safer than talking about real human beings, either because of their position in society or because of their racial or ethnic group membership. One of my favorite traditional folk tales is about making judgments of others. It comes from the country of Tanzania in East Africa. The rainy season that year had been the strongest ever. The river had broken its banks and there were floods everywhere. The animals tried to run up into the hills. The floods came so fast that many of the animals drowned, except the lucky monkeys who used their agility to climb up into the treetops. They looked down on the surface of the water where the fish were swimming and gracefully jumping out of the water. One of the monkeys saw the fish and shouted to his companion, "Look down, my friend, look at those poor creatures. They are going to drown. Do you see how they struggle in the water?" "Yes," said the other monkey, "what a pity. Probably they were late in escaping to the hills because they seem to have no legs. How can we save them?" "I think we must do something. Let's go close to the edge of the flood where the water is not deep enough to cover us, and we can help them to get out." So the monkeys did just that. They started catching the fish, but not without difficulty. One by one, they brought them out of the water and dragged them up onto the dry land. After a short time, there was an array of fish lying motionless on the grass. One monkey said, "Do you see? They were tired, but now they are just sleeping and resting. Had it not been for us, my friend, all these poor creatures without legs would have drowned." The other monkey replied, "They were trying to escape from us because they could not understand our good intentions. But when they wake up, they will be very grateful because we have brought them salvation." Do you know of similar tales from your culture? Share them with us on our website. We look forward to hearing from you. On the street, a drunk walked up to another man and asked, "What time is it?" The man said, It's 10 o'clock. The drunk said, I must be going crazy. All day long, I keep getting different answers.